Let's go ahead and reconvene. Thank you all very much for your promptness. Thank you. We're on regular agenda item 8, the CEO's report. Mr. Killigrew, it looks like it's your show again, and I hope you're rested. There's a lot of stuff in here. You may get some additional discussion on these topics. There is. There's a lot of material in the CEO's report, so please go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair Byron. First item is around staffing, and we're definitely excited that our family is growing. First, want to recognize Bobby Hurt. She is our receptionist and administrative assistant. She's actually local, lives in Pacific Grove, and she's actually worked at a nonprofit for a while. She spent 21 years operating her own business, and actually she was also with the United States Air Force, where she actually worked as a jet mechanic. So
all right.
Anybody who's got a jet, you can ask her and probably can go for a ride.
Wow. Well, and thank you, because I know you're also the one that's responsible for feeding us.
I am.
So thank you. Welcome.
I enjoy it.
Next up, we've got Masha Dubrovskia. She recently joined us. If you could stand up, Masha. She's one of our program outreach representatives. She actually spent 2 years working and serving on the board of the British Columbia Sustainable Energy Association. And she recently graduated with a Bachelor of Natural Resources and Conservation degree from the University of British Columbia. And now she's here working with us, and we're excited to have her on helping programs and outreach.
Welcome. Are you still a student?
And I've graduated.
All right, good.
Next up, we have Kelly Hughes, which unfortunately is not here tonight. I think she's getting ready for an event of some sort. She's joined us as a marketing and communication outreach representative. She recently received her degree of Bachelor of Arts from Cal State Monterey Bay, where she majored in human communication and journalism studies. And she actually spent 2 years as a membership and tours rep at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Interestingly enough. And definitely her past efforts included educating the public on overfishing, single-use plastics, and single-use plastics. Next up, we have Stephen Keene, who joins us as our manager of regulatory and legislative affairs. He brings a wealth of experience in the California energy market, where he worked at SDG&E, Southern San Diego Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, Sempra Energy, and as Navigant Consulting, as well as the California Independent Systems Operator. He's got a great experience in policy development, electric market design, resource planning, and resource adequacy. And we're really happy to have him on board to support Rob, as well as our general regulatory and legislative affairs.
So, welcome, all of you. Will we be hearing from this gentleman in future meetings?
Potentially, as well as our counsel, Robert Shaw.
Okay, good. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, you're clicking. A, good. On to B.
On to B. I don't need to read from this too much. So we, as you folks all well know, the city of San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay were trying to stand up their own program, and due for a variety of unfortunate challenges they faced, they quickly pivoted and requested membership in Monterey Bay Community Power. They joined our JPA late last year, and we're excited to serve them in early 2020. That kind of led us to think about what it means for a kind of disjointed San Luis Obispo County. When we do have a contiguous border, we see a lot of similarities with the ag industry, the wine industry, tourism and hospitality, especially between San Luis Obispo County and Monterey County. So it got us thinking that if we're serving 2 cities in that region, we may as well start talking with the remaining 5 cities in the county to unify the program unify the Central Coast under one program. So as it stands, we actually have 3 cities that have done all of the necessary requirements. So that's Paso Robles, Grover Beach, and Pismo Beach. We also have the city of Delray Oaks. Can't forget about them. They were the ones who kind of got it done first. And most recently, Arroyo Grande actually did the first reading of their ordinance, and they will be agendizing the resolution in July. I will be down in Atascadero on Tuesday night to present to their council, and then we will be hearing very shortly from San Luis Obispo County too. We also did a presentation to the San Luis Obispo Chamber in hopes of, getting some form of endorsement from the Chamber to kind of encourage a unified Central Coast program. So definitely a lot of good movement there. And we see just a lot of benefits of kind of the power of unifying these counties together, the political will, but also just the consistencies around economics and the socioeconomics, the industries that are there. We see a lot of similarities between Monterey County and San Luis Obispo County. And we're definitely excited that, 3 of the remaining 6 jurisdictions have fully gone through the processes, and we hope that the remaining do as well.
Could you expand real quick on the County of San Luis Obispo, what you mean by that? You'll hear from them shortly.
Yeah, they're currently investigating. They're doing an independent analysis, and I think they're waiting for all of the cities to kind of make a motion before they're going to move forward.
Mr. Hartman.
I think I asked this last time, but I don't recall the answer. But is there a financial incentive or disincentive in any way with the cities and counties coming on board? What does that look like for them?
I mean, what's the financial arrangement coming a year late?
Yeah, are you charging them a fee of any sort for coming on?
Yeah, so what and
what's that comprised of?
Yeah, so the cost that we've communicated from day one with the communities that we're interested is to help share with the implementation and the Joint Powers Authority amendment. So we estimate it'll be somewhere between $5,000 to $7,500 per jurisdiction to help with the amendment of those 2 plans. Outside of that, there's no other cost.
And do you have to go back to all jurisdictions then to amend the JPA? Or is it just the new jurisdictions?
Just the new jurisdictions. But per our JPA agreement, our bylaws, we have to send out a 30-day notice before the policy board meeting, notifying them of any new potential membership jurisdictions to allow them time to investigate, so that by the time we do bring forth any resolution to amend our JPA with new member jurisdictions, that there will be time for the community to weigh in.
Mr. Capra.
I just wanted to say it seems like there's a strong financial incentive for them to join Monterey Bay Community Power because they tap into the reserves we've raised, and then the whole area will be raising the remaining reserves we need for their area. So there's a big financial benefit.
So I think it's really important for this council to know where the policy board is on this. I did express some of the comments and concerns that were raised by this council a couple of months ago about the fact that as we expand into 3, 4, maybe even more counties, it becomes bigger than a little community. It becomes more difficult to govern. And I expressed those comments to the operations board and the policy board. Can you give us some feedback on the direction of the policy board with regard to this expansion?
Yeah, so currently the policy board, based on the June 6th meeting, the review of the governance structure was we will revisit the governance structure moving forward as we add new member agencies. There was a consistent theme that the shared seat or our current board structure is currently recommended, but they're definitely open for other ones. But there was a general sense that the opportunity of unifying the Central Coast under one program, that yes, there are a lot of challenges around the geographical territory. I think that's one of the biggest things. But the opportunity of providing choice, bringing these folks to the seat of the table when they couldn't set up their own program, and making sure that we can have that political power at the state level are some pretty strong benefits from it, as well as also just the increased load, the increased opportunity for delivering programs. And we see just a lot of synergies between San Luis Obispo County and our current service area. So
the policy board is very keen to see this happen, and we're welcoming the additional cities and counties with open arms, right?
Yes.
And from the council's point of view, that I think it's important for us to know that, so that we can continue to. So we know what the direction of the policy board is. Yes, and we'll be designing a kind of a philosophy and something to kind of guide us moving forward in terms of what this all means. So it's not just happening. But I think
at the end of the day, it's a tremendous opportunity for all of us. And I think if this wasn't happening, then you'd have 5 other cities in a county kind of figuring out what they would do, and then you have the residents and businesses from San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay benefiting from programs, benefiting from cost savings,
Right.
and them not having access to that either.
Okay, very good. Mr. Capron.
I was at the policy board meeting, and they had a pretty good debate on the issue. It was a discussion item, not an action item. And I think maybe I had a slightly different sense than JR did on that. I think that there's sort of a recognition and support that in favor of bringing San Luis Obispo County in. And then there's question marks about Santa Barbara County and what the right size is for the agency. Clearly huge advantages to growing it to maybe include Santa Barbara County, but certain significant disadvantages to that in terms of the governance and the community nature of the organization. And I hope that they have, I mean, it's hard timing-wise because they meet quarterly, but I hope that they have a lot more regular discussions on that and make a explicit decision on it, because at this point they haven't done that. That's the I go to all the policy board meetings, and that's the first time I've heard the policy board discuss that issue in any depth.
Yeah, but it is a concern this council's had, and we have expressed it to the policy board, and I think we'll continue to put that forward as a challenge. I'm sure they're well aware of the challenges involved in governance, but also we're trying to represent a community that's very diverse, and it gets even bigger and more diverse. And just growing the turf is not necessarily what I think. Well, I don't want to express a judgment on it. It may be creating more problems than it's worth. Okay, that's not here nor there. I know that you've been to an awful lot of meetings, Mr. Killigrew. You've probably been wearing out tires driving back and forth to these southern counties. We want to congratulate you as well on your progress that you're making. And so please don't take anything that I'm saying as discouragement. You're doing a great job on this. Well,
it's teamwork, definitely a whole bunch of teamwork. And I do want to, before I move on to the next item, just acknowledge all the advocates in San Luis Obispo, especially the Slow Climate Coalition, the amount of groundwork they've done. This has been a huge piece of their puzzle for a long time, and I just want to make sure this is on record how much we appreciate all of the council meetings they've gone to, all of the emails and support they've done to council members and businesses and everything. So I don't want that to ever go unnoticed or unrecognized.
Good.
So moving on to the quarterly MBCB outreach and engagement and community programs report. So I'll be doing the first portion, and I'll ask our fabulous manager of energy programs, Beth Trenchard, to come up to give you an update about the energy programs, as well as Jeremy Clark, the manager of energy trading, who'll update you about the microgrid. If you haven't gone to our website, I strongly encourage you to, because it's completely re-envisioned and rebranded, and it's a step in the right direction. So we spent a lot of time with our local web designer, Shipper Designs, out of San Juan Bautista, to redesign our website, and really excited with the functionality. It's a more streamlined, it's more inviting, and it looks like a long-standing utility or a long-standing public agency website. So I think we're all really proud of it. It also gives our staff a lot more flexibility to edit in real time and brings that functionality to us. Just a quick update around outreach here in our amazing Tri-County region. A lot of it is just about us educating, informing, and continuing to gather feedback at our community events, whether it's tabling events, presentations, forums, you name it. A lot of that work is kind of going down to San Luis Obispo as well, but we are keeping a finger on the pulse here. I still want to go back to a couple of the really important outreach efforts that always don't rise to the front, which is the one that the farm worker outreach. We're still doing that every 2 weeks. It's a really amazing program that I think one of our Alexis, our rep who's been leading the charge, actually was invited by the Cal CCA Environmental Justice and Equity Group to present to all the other CCAs statewide about this, and the group was like, wow, we hadn't even remotely thought about that type of outreach and engagement. So I think all of us are really proud of that. We're doing a lot of good outreach with CINSNE and SCORE, the South County outreach effort, just about educating underserved and disadvantaged customers, as well as we're doing a K through 12 STEM education outreach program right now. So I think we're really trying to kind of step up our game in terms of not just tabling events and whatnot, but trying to branch out to various stakeholders. So again, the numbers I think speak for themselves, but we also were really excited to have our energy programs workshop, the first of many, and then also our MBE VIP, our electric vehicle launch event that was at Monterey City Hall. Just a quick update. Our enrollment stats are staying strong. We are fully enrolled in terms of all the customers. We did our last batch of net energy metering customers in April, so we got a little over 270,000 customers, and we're still humming around 97% of account enrollment and 96% on the actual customer demand, the number of kilowatt hours that were eligible. The trends in terms of the three counties, in terms of enrollment successes, we've got Santa Cruz County looking pretty strong, Monterey County looking pretty strong, as well as San Benito. But again, it just shows us there's more work to be done with education. I think overall these numbers are very strong, but it just kind of shows us some areas where we can kind of spot check ourselves and actually start thinking about better ways to engage those communities.
They are strong. They're slightly above the average for the other CCAs, I believe. Mr. Hartman?
Jared, do you mind talking a little bit about what's your anticipation for San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay with bringing them online? Is there going to be an effort ahead of time?
Yeah, 100%. So we'll start. Our team actually got together to kind of think through our outreach efforts. We've been working with both cities to develop an outreach plan. We'll be hiring some folks to go down there, to be based there, to be handling the outreach efforts. So probably in the fall is when things will start dialing up in terms of events down there. Again, it's always good to remind ourselves of which customer segments that we have, at least based by the rate classes, in terms of enrollments, and are there any opportunities for us to continually to engage. Again, I'm still kind of blown away by the net energy metering customers. When I was at MCE or Marin Clean Energy, it was like 80-something%. And a lot of opted out NEM customers. So, kudos to the Monterey Bay Community Power NEM customers. We are seeing a little uptick in MB Prime, and then MB Share and MB Green Plus are still kind of trugging along. And I think we're going to, once we kind of get through some of these, our first year, we'll be able to start focusing more advertising on that and more kind of awareness campaigns.
So I have to comment on this. This MB Prime, this is the 100%,
Yep.
right? The correct brand. I got to tell you, I'm really coming more and more to the mind. Remember, we've been promoting renewables. We've been promoting rooftop solar for a long time, and I don't want to discourage anybody from doing that can afford to do it and the incentives work. But it is so easy to check the box and have 100% renewable energy delivered to your house. It costs a little bit more, but it sure is a heck of a lot less than putting $30,000 worth of PV on the roof. That's the route I took. So I encourage others to consider the same thing. It's put the PV on the roof, but even if you do, check the box. Okay.
Sounds like you'd be a great spokesperson if we could get a TV commercial.
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
Check the box campaign.
Check the box. Yeah, I like it. So on that note, I'll hand it over to our manager of energy programs, Beth Trenchard, to walk you through the great stuff that we have cooking.
Good evening, Council. Thanks for all the great feedback. I was back there madly taking notes. Thank you. So what I'd like to do is kind of, since we have somebody new here, I'm just going to do a real brief overview of each of the programs, and then I'll jump into the actual results. For the MB EV incentive program, that actually has two parts. The first part is funded by Monterey Bay Community Power, and the second part is funded by MBARD. I'm going to focus tonight on just the Monterey Bay Community Power funded portion. It is funded by customer rates, our customer revenue. It's also funded by getting our dealers to cough up some of their margin dollars, as well as the manufacturers, and we've taken advantage of state rebates as well as federal tax credits. The way the program worked is we did an RFP to all of our dealers. Of the participating dealers, we selected the most aggressive discounts off MSRP from both the dealer and the manufacturer. When a customer comes to our website and they get a certificate, they take that certificate to the dealer. The dealer gives them those discounts off MSRP at the time of purchase, and they add to that the Monterey Bay Community Power incentives. Those incentives range from $4,500 for an income qualified customer, $3,000 for public agencies, that's government agencies, schools, and nonprofits, and then the remaining community gets $1,000. I'm going to update those numbers a tad bit. As of earlier this week, we had about 65 certificates that were awarded, and the really cool part is over 25% of those are for our low-income customers. So I feel like we might have hit a point there, so I'm very excited. We are also seeing a real uptick. It started out pretty slow, and we were warned it would take a while for people to learn about it and really act on it, but we're definitely seeing an uptick. We had a big, really successful ride and drive event at the Monterey Farmers Market. We're having another one on Saturday at the Aptos Farmers Market, and that's getting a lot of attention. We're also having more of the Spanish-speaking radio ads hit, so I'm hopeful that we're going to continue to see an uptick in those in the interest. On the Central Coast Cal EVIP project, that stands for California EV Infrastructure Project, that's a charging station program. That's $6 million from the California Energy Commission, matched by $1 million in fiscal year 1920 from Monterey Bay Community Power, again, our based on our revenue, customer revenue. Working with the California Energy Commission, they have this very cool needs assessment that looks at how many charging stations does the Tri-County need in order to support 2025 EV adoption. And if you look at where we are today, we're at about 15% for level 2s and about 25% for DC fast chargers. Depending on, you can kind of estimate how many charging stations we're going to be able to install based on this $7 million program. But based on some estimates, we'd end up with about 600 level 2s, 60 DC fast chargers. That would take us to almost 60% of the needs assessment. And when you add to that MBARD's ongoing investment, the VW investments, we're in much better shape. We're getting there.
That's very good. Do you know how that compares to any other CCA regions or counties?
You know, it depends. San Jose has very high EV adoption rate. Peninsula also has much higher EV adoption rate. We're one of the lower EV adoption rates. Monterey Bay Community Power and Sonoma Clean Energy are pretty low. So getting charging stations installed is absolutely critical to that EV adoption rate, and this is getting us closer.
Mr. Hartman?
Do you mind if I ask a question? Who's going to be doing the installations?
I think it's going to depend on the site host, right? The site host is going to be selecting who installs and how, right? Some folks will be working through the vendors. Some folks will be, there's a tool online through Cal EVIP where you can actually look at all of the different resources available, including the IBEW engineers who signed up for it, to help with on-site assessments as well as the installations. A lot of folks, again, are just going through the vendors to do the entire installation, but some folks are going through engineering groups. It just depends. An update on Cal EVIP, if you'll recall, the idea was we would start marketing the program this month with the idea that the program would actually launch end of August or early September. There's been a change, and I'd like to share with you what's going on. If you'll recall, Monterey Bay Community Power is one of the first regions to get this funding. The other regions before us are Sacramento, a very urban, densely populated area, as well as Southern California, another fairly urban, densely populated area. And there was a concern around whether our success with Cal EVIP would be consistent with what those more urban populated areas experienced. So there has been a kind of wait and see, because just 2 weeks ago, Northern California Cal EVIP launched. That's Humboldt, Shasta, and Tehama County. Much more similar, much more rural to the Tri-County. The program launched, and within a week, this is a $4 million project. 4.3 million was requested in funding in 1 week. So at that point, CEC and CSE took a step back to evaluate whether the program was too rich. If, the current program really would cover about 75% of a level 2 equipment plus installation, and 50 to 75% for a DC fast charger. The concern is that those incentives are just too rich, so they're evaluating it. So we're in a holding pattern. At this point, they're evaluating. If they do come back with new incentives, they'll have to have another public workshop. We're going to have to get public input. So at this point, we're just waiting to see what the next steps are, and we'll be able to give you an update on the program launch at that time. Any questions?
A question about the EV certificates. Do you have any projection as to what percentage of the available funds you think will be spent this year?
I think it's going to be small.
And then the rest of the funds will roll over and we'll learn from this year and try to build it next year?
Yes, and we're also talking about potentially taking some of the funds, assuming there's some left over, and working a local program with the MBARD program. So we would actually increase the incentive supporting phase 2 for local purchases.
Is that the 700K
Yes.
amount? Okay. And why no public takers?
You know, I think what we've learned this year is that the public agencies in particular, as well as the nonprofits, they need more time to know about a program and act on it. They have to include it in their budget, right? So if we can tell them today that we're going to have a program this time next year, they can plan around it. But to try and share with them, you know, a couple months before a program is launched that we're doing this thing just wasn't enough time.
Yeah, Beth, if I could just add, a lot of agencies, even such as ours, we purchase vehicles under state contract. And so we will go out to local automobile dealers to purchase vehicles if they can beat the state contract. But since the state's buying for vehicles throughout the state, they usually get a pretty good price point. So that may be one reason as well. But perhaps there's a way to work it in with the state contract to get that out. And then it's not all gloom and doom on the Cali VIP too. MBARD is spending about, and has spent over the past couple of years, about $1.4 million a year. We see that maybe ticking up a little in the next few years. So we'll be working that, and we hope to, where we can, leverage and synergize our projects with community power as well.
Good questions. Thank you. Shall we let Ms. Trenchard go?
I'm going to move on to Project Sunshine. That's a program where we partnered with Grid Alternatives. They're a nonprofit solar developer. Grid Alternatives has access to state funding. It's called SASH. So the goal was to have 20 homes with solar systems installed at low-income housing. Right now we've installed, and of that funding, the state funding covers about 75% of the cost, and then Monterey Bay Community Power comes in with the other 25%. So that's the program. It's for 20 houses. To date, we've installed 8 systems. We're going to have another one installed at the end of this month. Through 7 of those installations, 32 people have been trained through their work development program. And lastly, Electrification Strategic Plan. We are working with Tierra Resources. They are also a local company. They have one of their principals lives in Santa Cruz, and they have an office in Santa Cruz. In May, we start, if you'll recall, there are 3 tasks. The first task was to really capture data that really described what the 4 counties look like. What does our transportation stock look like? Light, medium, and heavy duty. What are the fleets? Where are they located? What fuel use does it look like? We did the same thing with our building, both commercial and residential building stock. By developing this basis of what the 4 counties look like, it gives us a real sense of where the need is for programs. So that was task 1. We've gone through, we're almost complete with task 1. We've had a stakeholder meeting 2 weeks ago, I can't remember, where we had government agencies, MBARD, AMBAG, all of our sister cities, all there to really beat up both the assumptions we were using and how we could move forward with that core kind of set of data assumptions. The next task is to establish greenhouse gas emission targets for 2025 and 2030. Taking all of that information together, looking at various criteria elements, we'll end up with a 5-year program roadmap. Again, all of these pieces are kind of interactive, and we've been incorporating multiple stakeholders throughout the process to both vet what we're doing, what our assumptions are, and how to move it forward. I think that's it.
Mr. Osmer.
Yeah, so Beth, my question's the same as the last time this came up, is are we making any motion on worrying about the house under the roof in terms of energy efficiency, energy audit, weatherization?
Grid alternatives, according to grid alternatives, because of the way the SASH funding is structured, they cannot incorporate energy efficiencies up front. They do provide, and I can bring in the flyer that they give to all applicants about home energy efficiency, what they need to do to go after energy efficiency, but they can't coordinate getting the work done and pulling in, for instance, CCES before the actual installation. They just haven't been able to tie that in with the state funding.
How about afterwards?
I don't think there's any follow-up afterwards, short of leaving the pamphlet to be there.
So yeah, and let me be. You're clear that they're prohibited from doing this by SASH requirements, which they wrote.
Kaplan.
Beth, in August, will you be bringing the 5-year program roadmap? Will that be a discussion item, or will you be looking at approval of a 5-year program roadmap to send on to the policy board?
You know, I think it's going to be very similar to what we did last year, where what we're approving is the dollar chunk that goes to programs. But if you'll recall, how we actually did the programs over time was a very long process where we defined how the program was defined and how it was distributed. So I see this as a very long process over the next multiple months of first starting with the input that we get from Tierra and then refining it as we get closer to implementation.
But
Thank you.
But Mr. Capron, I think your point's well taken. My sense is this council would very much like to be engaged in that process.
Absolutely.
So I hope that we see it before ops and policy boards do.
You'll see it in August, well before our September ops or policy board.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then we'll take your input, of course, and reflect that within whatever it does go to the boards.
Thank you, Beth. Up
Thank you, Ms.
next,
Trenchard.
we'll have Jeremy Clark, our manager of energy trading, to discuss an update on the microgrid Smart Connect program.
Good evening, council members. My name is Jeremy Clark. I'm the manager of energy trading. I'm here to give a few updates from Power Services. So first, I'll start with the Smart Connect microgrid program. We had 8 site host applications from the public, transportation, education, both private, small, and large. And, you know, we had quite a few of the applications from the southern part of Monterey County. So what we're really trying to achieve from the microgrid program is economic expansion, you know, due to grid constraints or just a lack of infrastructure, economic development, resilience, and to enhance customer partnerships. So we, a couple months ago is when we released the applications out to the public, and from those 8 site host applications, we're in basically final fact finding with a couple of them to see how we can really design this RFP that's coming out in mid to late June to the EPCs, or basically their engineering firms, to help us design these microgrids. So, you know, that's really exciting to get out and actually have on-site meetings with some of these potential site hosts to get a better idea of the story that we need to tell to the engineering and construction companies to get microgrids built in our Tri-County area. So is that all on that slide? If you does anyone have any questions regarding the microgrids?
Jeff?
Kaplan?
When Matt presented to us on the microgrids previously, and when the program was going to get launched, the definition of what a project looked like was fairly loose because it's an ongoing process. It's a new program, and we didn't know what kind of applications we get in. I wonder if you could just just briefly describe. I mean, are these projects that are on the grid that need more capacity? Or are they totally off the grid? Kind of the character of the projects we're looking at.
Yeah, no, thanks, Seth. In the beginning, we were really looking for an island before interconnect kind of host. And out of the application we received, there were only a couple that really fit that mold. So we receive applications from a wide variety of different types of microgrids or kind of just reliability type projects that we're really looking at. And I'm glad that it was designed kind of with a loose and wide range of just description, because that's what we really got was a lot of different types of potential microgrids out there. It's hard to really define what a microgrid is. I mean, everyone thinks that it's just on-site generation to meet this one host, but there's different aspects to different sites that a microgrid could still serve.
And the ones that you're looking at that were proposed, do they have on-site turbine generation, and have you been able to use renewable fuels for that?
So there's one that we are looking at that does currently have on-site generation. The other, it doesn't have anything. It is an opportunity for us to partner with someone else in the county to really expand an economic park, a business park, and basically help them electrify it from the ground up. And we are looking at definitely renewable generation to help meet those needs.
And we would be, Monterey Bay Community Power would be selling kilowatts to the customer, and we would own the generation and facilities?
We are still evaluating different types of ownership structures, whether it be us or the off-takers. But, kind of one of the designs we've talked about is Monterey Bay Community Power owning the generation assets and rate basing our investment. But there's also different structures that we're still trying to evaluate, but we can't really evaluate it until we learn more about the sites and, the financing and everything else behind it.
Mr. Hartman, do you have a question?
Yeah, Jeremy, I like what you have under the value of the program, but I'm not seeing renewables or greenhouse gas reduction as one of those values. Why not?
It is definitely a part of the microgrid program. I mean, with Monterey Bay, we strive to meet at least the RPS standards, and that's what we will do with this microgrid program, barring any restrictions that just forbid it, which I don't see any with these site hosts that we're currently pursuing. So renewables are going to be a portion of the overall generation. We don't know the actual fuel mix at this point because we haven't got that far down, into the process. But when we evaluate the different types of generation for these sites, we're going to see, what part of it can be renewable and it still be cost effective, and it still help grow those communities.
Okay, that's good to hear. Just because we had heard early on that it could be like diesel generators or other tractors or whatever they want to install to provide generation of power.
Well, I think there could be non-renewable generation as part of this generation mix. It really depends on the how often and what hours we need to deliver energy. If it's a 7 by 24 operation, we can't just do that with solar and battery, so we have to look at other options. And nothing's off the table at this point, but we're going to do what we can cost effectively and have renewable resources in the mix.
And so just to put the nail in the coffin, I mean, it's just the perception of it, right? I mean, we don't want to be installing generators as a means of microgrids. I don't think that's the perception that a lot of people had envisioned for a program like this. So I think it was, I'm going to say it was a shock to hear that previously. So I'm glad to hear that maybe you're trying to explore more options. But I think people want to look at greener alternatives than.
We are exploring more options, and we've got to make sure though that the microgrids we install are resilient and reliable as well, and we want to make sure that this project is successful and actually helps strengthen the areas that we're trying to partner with.
So I'll put a stake in the ground. Having been a former energy commissioner, having permitted natural gas-fired power plants, having done the regulations on cogeneration efficiency, and even having started my own private business prior to that, built around doing microgrid cogeneration, I'm a big advocate of all of this. Times have changed, and I'm concerned that this community may not look favorably upon fossil-fired generation is what we're funding. And the stake I want to put in the ground, and you can all disagree with me if you wish, is that I'm concerned that if we have an opportunity for input on this, and I hope we do, we might not be in favor of this any longer. It's all about renewables now. So maybe I'll put that out as a discussion point for my council, but that's kind of where I've come to in my thinking. And that's an evolution, if you will, that I'm concerned that we're trying to meet other goals that may be important, economic development, resiliency of the grid, helping out businesses in our community. These are all important things, but we may get a lot of pushback from community members that say that's not what we signed up for.
That's understood. JR, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, I'll echo what Jeremy said, but it's also this will be the first of many iterations of it. I think the impetus around this was like, what can our role be in providing access to electricity and help growing and developing this region economically, but at the same time we also have to be cognizant of the power mix that we're putting in, that it meets the JPA's goals. But I do think that there will be other opportunities for microgrids to meet critical facilities or for resiliency's perspective. So I think whatever comes out first, it's based on a ton of analysis, and it's going to be based on what we see as like a good play, and we'll be presenting all those elements to you. Because again, at the end of the day, it's not like we're going to go say, oh, we're just going to put in a bunch of natural gas turbines just because we want, some more jobs. That's not the theory at all. It's always been about how do we balance and create a load profile to serve this particular host site's needs, but do it in the cleanest way possible.
And we've looked at options as far as green gas, landfill gas, and other fuel supply to possibly have as a mixture, or even more than just a mixture in some, if we have to have a combustion turbine on some of these sites. We don't know what the power mix is going to be for these sites at this time. I mean, right now we're selecting a site, and then that's when we're going to issue the RFP to get the engineers and construction companies involved to learn what we can really do. If we can go 100% renewable and it's cost effective, that's definitely something that we will look at. But we want to make sure that we're leaving options open at this time.
Mm-hmm. No, it's all good, and I'm sure other council members all will comment on this. I'm just stating my own point of view that there may be some pushback from this community if it's not renewables.
So, can I move on?
Yeah. So Jeremy will provide the next few updates for the power source disclosure, the Morro Bay Offshore Wind, and then the long-term power supply RFO.
So on an annual basis, the California Energy Commission, we have to supply annual reports for MB Choice and MB Prime for kind of our power mix. And that was submitted in 2018 for our power source disclosure. That will be part of the power content label that will be mailed out to all of our customers in October. And as far as the information that our customers will see on that, our power source disclosure, once we calculated it, we were 100% carbon free. Of that, 34% of it qualified as in-state renewable or state qualified renewable, and the other 66% was large hydro. And then the next thing on the report is the Morro Bay Offshore Wind. There was a memorandum of understanding that is included in the board packet that we're seeking to take to the operations board later this month. It's with Castle Wind, who's with a joint venture with Trident Winds. Castle Wind is based out of the Pacific Northwest and really has done quite a bit of research and development in offshore wind projects. They have joined with ENBW North America, which is a German utility. And those two companies have been exploring the possibility of offshore wind in the Morro Bay area, about 30 miles off the coast.
Wow.
They're looking at potentially installing, I think, up to 1,000 megawatts of capacity out 30 miles off the coast. And basically what this memorandum of understanding between Monterey Bay and the Castle Wind joint venture is, it's a non-binding agreement, but it expresses that we have interest in good faith interest with the intent to draft and negotiate and potentially execute a power purchase agreement down the road. Right now, this is still in the early stages of development. You know, the commercial operation date on something like this would be 2025 at the earliest, and maybe later. We're just trying to show our support for offshore wind, which has a pretty high delivery rate for renewables, and it would also bring jobs to the local Morro Bay area. And like I said, we're looking to take the memorandum of understanding to this operations board. This, I think, June 26th is the next ops meeting.
Ms. Wolfram.
Thank you. So thinking about both of the topics that you just talked about, when you mentioned the 66% large hydro, I was starting to think about how I work for the Monterey Bay Aquarium and how we helped to form MB Prime so that it could be not only 100% contributing an option that contributed to the California Renewable Portfolio Standard, so the eligible renewables, but also so it was less of an impact for fish and other wildlife. And when I think about that, and I think about offshore wind, I'm really excited to see that we're moving towards an eligible renewable that can support California's renewable energy goals. At the same time, it makes me think about other potential environmental impacts. So I know that you all have signed this MOU with Castle Wind. I know that they are doing a really good job as far as all the other companies out there to reaching out to stakeholders. We've also talked before, JR has talked, and I know Tom has talked with MBARI, our sister institution, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, that has done a lot of seafloor studies and seafloor mapping, especially down in the Morro Bay area. And so I would like to suggest that we keep those communication lines open and we start work. This is a long process. Environmental studies haven't been done. They're setting the baselines now. But I'd like us to keep in contact and to keep working together to ensure that it's not only good economically, but it's also good environmentally.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Good. Thank you for your comment. Mr. Hartman, did you want to add? Okay.
And, you know, I just wanted to add, too, at the June 26th ops board meeting, The founder of Castle Wind will be giving a short presentation there as well. So just wanted to note that. The last thing on my list is our long-term renewable power supply RFO. We issued it April 17th, got all the proposals back May 17th. Out of that, we received, there were, 36 developers submitted 54 projects, and we had about 187 different pricing variations. So right now, we're still wading through all the different options, trying to evaluate what really fits our portfolio the best, what is priced the best, and what just puts us in a great situation all around. The technologies that we received, they go anywhere from solar only, solar storage, wind, and geothermal, and a couple other type of hybrid packages. So we got a lot of variations that we're looking into, and hopefully in the middle of June, well, it's past the middle of June already, isn't it? Here, I think beginning of July is when we're going to hopefully start shortlisting the potential developers and move into negotiations.
Are you happy with what you've got? Are they exceeding your expectations?
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of good options out there, and then a lot of good prices. But we also got to take into consideration location and technology type as well, and when is that generator producing? So there's different things that we're weighing when we look at our entire portfolio.
Mr. Caput?
I had a couple of questions. What's the geography? Are any of those in our region, or are they all in the state? Or
most of them are in the state, and there are a couple that are in our kind of the 4 county region. And then we are evaluating all of them to see what makes the most sense.
And is the being in our region, is that kind of one of the criteria on your evaluation list that you'd give some, looking at pluses and minuses, you'd give a plus to a local project?
Yeah, location is definitely a criteria, and as far as our scoring matrix is concerned, local is part of that as well.
Okay, thanks. And the other question I had has to do with paying prevailing wages in the construction of these larger projects. Is that something that we've done, like on the New Mexico wind farm? Was that a factor in those contracts, and then the local and statewide ones? What's the current policy on that in our RFPs?
Yeah, that was definitely a factor in the first 3 that we signed, and I don't see anything changing with this next go around.
It was a factor, meaning that they had a requirement for.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, the payment of prevailing wage on public projects isn't a policy issue. It's a state statutory issue. So anytime that there's going to be a private project for the benefit of public, or a private project or a public project that involves public money, statutorily it has to involve prevailing wages.
Good.
So that would apply if it was essentially a PPA and we were contracting to buy kilowatts as opposed to building and owning a project?
Well, if the facility is existing, then there wouldn't be any construction. We're just off-takers of the power.
Right.
Similarly, if there is a development that we're not participating in, we're not funding in any way, we're just an off-taker, then I would evaluate that. But as I sit here, I wouldn't expect that would be a public project under the labor code definition.
So I guess that's the kind of project I'm asking about. If we have a policy that we go into contract on a PPA kind of basis where we're buying power as opposed to having any interest in the project, or, they're not necessarily building it for us, but we're just signing a long-term contract to buy power. Do we have any kind of policy about whether that project, when it's built, kind of for our benefit?
I kind of understand where you're coming from. Most of the contracts that we enter into for that type of power purchase, they're not long term. They're shorter term with off of resources that are already built. So we don't have really an opinion on it at that point because it's already built. But the ones that we're looking at now, they're not built yet. They are new developments. So
They would. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Hartman.
I'll add to that because that's my area of expertise. I think it would be good to have a policy on that we are looking at projects that if there are going to be new construction that they are built under prevailing wage. Because I mean, there could be a situation where we're maybe one of multiple parties buying as part of the PPA, and that wouldn't have the requirement of prevailing wage. So I think it's something to look for. Also, in-state construction, right? So try to avoid going to New Mexico to buy wind, which is what we did before, and focusing on in-state. Again, this is community power, right? And we want to try to put community people to work. So anything that we can do to help fulfill that would be good. And again, having a policy, maybe it's something that this board could put into place on the requirement of, or a factor at least in deciding that if you're going to pursue a PPA with somebody, that it was built or is built with prevailing wages.
Does anyone remember? I'm sure there's people with better memories than mine. Isn't that part of the JPA? Isn't that part of the requirements in the agreement? Do we know? No, you don't have to go look for it now. Well, what Mr. Hartman just said, that local projects, local jobs, local, retaining funds. This has always been touted amongst, creation of CCAs as one of the benefits. Right. And I was just wondering if it was in there.
Well, yeah, that's a little clearer. Then, yeah, I mean, certainly as part of the goals.
Did you just flip to the right page?
Well, luckily we index them, so I take no credit. Bren actually keeps me organized. Stimulating, sustaining the local economy by lowering electric rates and creating local jobs is one of the goals of the CCA and our Joint Powers Authority. Yeah.
Good.
So I'll keep going since this is my last hurrah. So with the Cal EVIP, I think there's sort of a gap that could be closed there with getting local people to work, right? So there really isn't any. So that is one of the awesome capabilities that a CCA can do is to stimulate the local economy. And have an effect on that. And so I think we sort of missed the boat with the Cal EVIP program. I think it's a great program, but we're not going as far as we could with ensuring the local people are getting put to work. So for me with the electricians union, I don't care where the contractor comes from. So a lot of times there's a focus on the local shop being hired, but that's not really where the attention needs to be. It needs to be on the community members going to work so that they keep the money in our community. And so for me, I don't care where the contractor comes from. As long as they're hiring local people to go to work, that's what's important. And so keeping that money locally. I don't want to have companies coming from LA, coming from Fresno to come up and do our installations. And so there is no control over that. So, and again, our money's going to a New Mexico wind farm is not that great or ideal either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Thanks for the question, the comment, and thank you for being able to answer my question so quickly, Mr. Shaw. Mr. Groot.
So on another subject, as you're evaluating, I'm sorry, we're not done yet.
Mr. Clark,
sorry.
We'd love to have you come back up.
Good, thank you.
Sorry.
That's about out the door.
So are we.
So as you're evaluating these projects, and I understand they're all new construction now, so as they're large-scale solar or they're large-scale wind turbine, are you also looking at the conversion of a land use and what that could impact on the local communities if those go through, such as taking prime ag lands out of production?
I don't think that's currently an evaluation factor in the joint RFP with Silicon Valley, but there are certain permits that permitting that the developers will have to get in order to use these locations for a new project. environmental permits and things like that.
I'll jump in to help clarify. I think this is true with any long-term PPA where there would be a new facility being built, but also with the Castle Wind facility, the offshore facility as well. That the MOU for Castle Wind, for instance, is not a commitment to that project in any way. The MOU is saying essentially that Castle Wind, if you get your project built and you are able to deliver power in 2025 or sometime thereafter, after you get it built, which before they get there, they have to go through the environmental, at the federal level, the NEPA process, at the state level would be the CEQA process. So those impacts are going to be analyzed through that process. That analysis happens with the authorizing board, the board that has the discretionary decision whether to issue a permit or not. That's where that will occur. But once they get their project permitted, assuming that through environmental review, they get permitted, they get built, they're ready to produce power, at that point we're saying we're interested in looking at your project. We may be an off-taker if we can come to an agreement on what that project may be. So there's a number of steps, obviously, that go through that. Monterey Bay Community Power isn't part of the permitting or decision-making process with respect to that discretionary decision to issue a permit. But I think your point is well taken that as we are evaluating projects, we want to consider projects that will have at least a mitigated, if not eliminated, kind of environmental impact, and that we want good partners that are going to be full faith and credit through that environmental review process with whomever their permitting agency is.
Maybe at a future meeting, we could look at what some of the other CCAs have done in regards to defining criteria that they, things that are valuable to their community, so that they put as stipulations on when they're going out for power or projects and such. Would that be possible?
I think it's something that we can take back and maybe get feedback from you guys as well. We have looked at other communities to see how they basically score the projects that come in, and it's they're all pretty similar.
Well, I'm saying some have actually adopted policy on have established criteria on what projects are either viable or not. So whether it's ag or whatever, prevailing wage or union labor, whatever the case may be, but they've actually spelled it out into policy. So maybe if that could be collected and then brought back to this board.
Did you say that other CCAs have such criteria?
Yes. I would venture to guess more than half have different that I know of.
Very good comment. If there's no other questions, I'd like to end on what I hope is a very positive note. This is all very encouraging. I have to tell you, in promoting CCAs around the state, primarily in the Bay Area over the last 4 or 5 years, one of the arguments that I often heard on the part of environmental community was that CCAs would basically make renewable energy scarce and drive up the price, or at least variations of that kind of argument. And to have this kind of response to your solicitation indicates that's not the case. If anything, you're stimulating the very thing we want, and that is more renewable offerings. So I see that as a very positive thing. And what I think you're hearing from the council is we're concerned about, obviously, the impact of some of these things, and we want to derive all the benefits we can from making good choices. However, what was not discussed is cost is important, so we know that that's your number one criteria in serving this community. So I think I need to open this up to, no, we're not done with that. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair Byron, we have one more update on the budget from
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
none other than Tiffany Law, our Director of Finance and Administrative Services.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Tiffany Law, the Director of Finance and Administrative Services here, and I would like to share with you about our budget update for the fiscal year 18-19. In mid-April, PG&E filed their 2019 Energy Resources Recovery Account, which are also called ERA. forecast revenue requirement with the CPUC. And then our 18-19 mid-year budget was therefore updated to reflect the proposed changes to the PCIA, which was increased by 28% versus 20% from the previous assumption, and the generation rates, which was increased by 7% versus a reduction of 13% from our previous assumption. And then also the anticipated implementation of the gen rates, and then the PCIA rates adjustments will be delayed from May to July at the earliest. And the 20% increase in gen rates assumption from July to September will actually allow us to meet our reserve target for the Tri-County by the end of 2019. However, such projection may shift to the spring of 2020, considering that we are planning to enroll the cities of SLO and Morro Bay in January 2020. And because of all the uncertainties around our expansion to SLO and to the Santa Barbara, we have decided to report a more accurate revenue and expenses projection during our 1920 budget plus 5-year projection to our operations board in August. So I conclude my update and happy to answer any questions.
That was very brief. Any questions? I have a question that I was not clear on, and I was hoping that you could explain it to me, because maybe I'm weak in this financial area, but why is it that the PCA went up so much but yet rates went down? Is this something that maybe this is Mr. Killigrew's territory? Is this something that favors the incumbent IOU, that their rates don't go up very much, but yet they're able to grab a larger portion of let's say our share of the pie? In other words, the PCIA went up. Am I asking the wrong question, I guess would be the first thing, but I find that confusing.
Chair Byron, yes, it is confusing. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but the whole CCA community from kind of day one with this new era finally was under the assumption generation rates were going to go down, PCI was going to go up. The new kind of at least initial filings is now having rates going up and the PCIA kind of shrinking a little bit.
So I even had it wrong. I had it
so
backwards.
It's been kind of inversed on ourselves. But what I think the silver lining in all this is that our once those new rates come out, we can formulate the final budget numbers and we get the final rates. Our rebates going up significantly, so our customers will be saving a lot more money than they did in 2018.
Yeah,
so I
that's
think
the bottom line, is that we're in better shape than we had thought we would be.
Yes, we do.
Mr. Capron.
And our rebates will be going up. At what point, I know it's a moving target with the different cities coming in, but at what point do you anticipate a significant increase in the budget for programs?
Well, right now we're still waiting for the final generation rates from PG&E, and then we expect to receive it by the end of June. So once we receive it, we will calculate it, and then we will release the actual rebate rates.
The rebate rate, and what about programs? The budget for programs?
For next year?
Yeah, just going forward. I mean, originally the projection was we would fill the coffers with our reserve funds, and then our program budget would go up substantially, but we'd hold off until we got our reserves built up. And now we keep continuing to up the ante on reserves. I know there was some talk about maybe slowing the rate that we hit our ultimate reserves a little bit because we've been doing so well. I haven't heard anything recently about any kind of projection when we're going to hit a level of substantially increased program funding.
Well, at least for the next fiscal year. So we will. I mean, if you look at attachment 4, it has kind of the proposed mid-year budget. So we should have a pretty significant amount in programs. But again, once we hit that reserve target, then all of a sudden any net surplus is split 50-50, 50 to rebates and 50 to programs. So if you would kind of take a ballpark figure, if the next surplus is say $35-40 million in the next fiscal year, then half of that would be for rebates and half of that would be for programs. And then even if we do expand you know, it's kind of in a gradual stance, so we'd be able to make that up in a few months or half a year or something like that. It wouldn't be like we'd have to wait 3 or 4 years. So it'd be a little bit of a restart and a pull and start. But in the next few years, yes, there will be probably significant capital available.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so no, we're not there yet. We still have more to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So on this particular item, which...
We're down to H, I
sorry.
believe.
Sorry. On this note, we'll hand it over to General Counsel Rob Shaw for the legislative update.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Killigrew, Chair Byron, members of the council. So some of you know that I'll be starting officially on July 1st. We all were introduced to Mr. Keene, who's the new manager of regulatory and legislative affairs, and with new staff comes a new outlook with respect to the legislative and regulatory components. Part of that, I think, is that I would like to come back likely at your next meeting in August and start developing a policy guidance for legislative action that would really apply to the next legislative cycle. But that component would be identifying policy issues and then looking to apply principles to those policy issues that will guide our legislative actions as we move forward. So that's one component I'm happy to kind of foreshadow for you. And then moving on, I want to thank a member of the public, Beverly DeShaw, for making the trip down here in traffic and then for sticking around with all of us, because I think she's right. I think that legislative wins come from mobilizing and activating your partners, your supporters, your advocates, and we need to start doing that more effectively. We differ a little bit. I do think that CalCCA has been doing a very effective job, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that we haven't done, and you'll all see when you get back to your inboxes after this, is an action alert with respect to SB 56 and SB 155, which are both moving to committee. I'll fill you in on what those are in a moment. But essentially reaching out to you and saying that as a member of our Community Advisory Committee, here's the current status of this bill. It's going to committee. It's going to come up for a vote. Please reach out to your representatives. Here's a draft letter that you can utilize to do that. Excellent. And I think in addition to just it coming from you, it's important to, again, mobilize our advocates, mobilize those supporters that are in the community. Ms. DeShaw identified a few of them that would be good areas to start mobilizing through some of that. But that initial outreach, because again, the way that we are able to get legislative wins is through mobilizing. So again, new staff, I'm excited to have Stephen help me, and as part of that comes a new outlook. Moving quickly, I do think the CalCCA has been very effective, and I want to say that they're not just lobbying with respect to the legislative aspect, it's the regulatory aspect as well. And the regulatory aspect is it never ends. It's just as intense. So the last few years we've saw an onslaught at the start of the legislative session of exactly 12 to 15 bills that are really designed, should they go through unamended, they would have a significant impact on CCA operations. And on the regulatory side, that's happening all the time. And part of that is an educational shift. Part of that is demonstrating the benefits of CCAs. Part of that is demonstrating the successes of CCAs. So CalCCA, our industry group, has, I think, been very effective in that regard. One kind of success to highlight is on AB 1362, which started out as a bill for IOUs to get approval to be able to use ratepayer money to lobby against CCAs. And that was successfully amended to be a clearinghouse for information. So now it's going to be, to the extent that people want to put out information, whether it's about IOUs, ESPs, CCAs, or any load servicing entity, it'll go through a clearinghouse. So that, I think, has been a big success in that regard. And that's still moving through its committees as well. I talked a moment ago about SB 56. That is a a central buyer issue that comes from Senator Garcia, and we'll see in the next 3 weeks or so, that's going to go before the Senate Energy and Utilities Commission, and that's one of those things we're asking you to reach out to your member. And I do want to say that with respect to our local representatives, they have been consistently strong votes in support of CCAs. We haven't seen votes going the other way. This is an area, though, that AB 56 got out of the Assembly by 1 vote. And there is a representative that represents a portion of Monterey Bay Community Power that voted against it twice in committee and then voted for it to get out of Assembly. And that's why the legislative action alert is so important. Moving on to SB 155, this is a Senator Bradford bill, and this is going to go to 2 committees in the Senate, the Utilities and Energy Committee and then the Natural Resources Committee. And this bill is focused on the IRP process. I mean, one of the things that we see about that is as a principle currently, maintaining local control of the boards that set our rates and set our policies, set our procurement strategies. We want to maintain that. This is a bill that we think through some technical language looks to strip some of that local control and local authority away and send it back to the CPUC, where they would have the ability to order procurement through the IRP. By not, currently they certify our IRPs, it's now said that it's going to approve the IRP. So there's some technical language that we feel is significant, and we're actively opposing that. SB 520 is another Senator Bradford bill. This bill looks to set a polar, and it originally started out with setting a provider of last resort. That's your default energy provider should your current energy provider not be able to deliver service. It's currently set that the IOUs are the default polars, and while some people in support of this bill would say that the IOUs are well positioned to do that, I would look at our current situation and say that the IOU in our service territory has demonstrated it's not well positioned to do that. But I think with respect to this bill, which we continue to oppose, we've offered amendments. CalCCA has met with the author. She's met with other supporters of the bill. And individuals that are sympathetic to try to improve this bill. We've offered amendments and will continue to do that as we move forward. There will be a point where that opposition may change from, offering amendments to try to make the bill work. It's really aimed at trying to ensure grid stability, and that may be a noble cause, but this bill, I think we see some obvious flaws in it, and we continue to oppose it. Another Senator Bradford bill, this is SB 676. This is a transportation electrification bill, and it's really looking to move the peak charging rates and the issues there. One, I should say that there are some amendments that have come out late last night, early this morning, so we're still evaluating those. It looks like it's changing the standard in order to be able to get into those programs. Increasing the threshold amount from a dollar standpoint, which would limit access to CCAs to some of those dollars. So that's a bill that we need to work through some of the amendment language that came out last night. Another one that's moving quickly, and there were amendments late last night, is SB 774. That's a Senator Stern bill, and that is with regard to deployment of microgrids. We have been maintaining a support, if amended, position with respect to that, looking to build stability in the grid, looking to give control to CCAs, include CCAs in the ability to deploy microgrid generation and really front-of-the-meter services. That's a bill that, again, we've got to look at those amendments. That position may change as we work through those. And another one, another Senator Bradford bill, and another bill that has late-time amendments is SB 255. That bill looks at CPUC supplier diversity issues, and again, there's a lot of it relates to our implementation plan. We're looking to separate it from as a requirement through the implementation plan that we would demonstrate diversity of procurement services. But the amendments, again, are pretty fresh, so we're still working through those. I've been sitting here receiving emails throughout the evening from members of CalCCA and other CCAs with respect to trying to figure out how these amendments work when we get to boots on the ground. So there is a lot of work. There are a lot of bills. I think in the short term, depending on how you define short term, but I think over the next 5 years, I think we will continue to see a legislative agenda coming from IOUs that may be well-intentioned with respect to increasing grid stability, meeting state target goals with respect to renewables, having resource reliance in addition to grid stability. All of those things are really important issues. It's not enough, at least in my view, and I think in CalCCA's view, to simply oppose what might be bad bills with good intentions. We're really trying to work to improve these bills. Now, you probably heard here that there are some there's some consistency with respect to where these bills are originating. So the amount that those amendments are going to be well taken, they may or may not be, but we'll make that effort because we want to offer solutions. But there will be a time where we oppose that. And frankly, again, new staff, new faces, new philosophy, we want to start getting out in front of these and proposing legislation that's going to help CCAs demonstrate their value to their local communities and to the grid. So that's another component of it. And the last thing I want to end with respect to offering solutions, the governor's wildfire strike force report came out towards the end of May, and he set a deadline of July 12th. He wants to see legislation that addresses these issues with respect to grid stability, reliability, public safety. CalCCA has developed a position in a letter to the governor that went out earlier this afternoon, and I'll push that out to all of you as well so that you have a copy. But again, it's a solution offering opportunity, and it's really offering that the CCAs can help be a solution with respect to the public safety issue, not just the reliability issue where we think we can step up and offer those solutions, but with respect to the public safety component as well. Let the IOUs focus on what they need to focus. We can handle the electric generation for our customers. We can procure those elements that are necessary. Let the IOUs focus on safety, on their wires and distribution. So again, it's trying to be solution oriented in trying to find answers to what are really tough questions. So I'll end on this. With respect to process, currently right now, our MBCP lobbyist provides us an update at the end of every month. That may not work well for you, so you have an update that's the May update. We're here towards the end of June. I've elected at this point to do an oral update because I knew that things were moving so quickly, and I thought this was the best way to get you the most up-to-date information. That may change in the future. You may see memos that come directly from me or are supplemented by our lobbyists that are a little bit more up-to-date. Any questions?
That's a very good summary. I'm sure there's some questions. Mr. Stedman.
Well, just a couple of comments. I would recommend, through my professional association, the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, we have done a lot of advocacy on the behalf of CCAs because of the improvement in air quality. And we've done the good fight over the years because it seems like every year there's a batch of bills that say CCAs are hereby abolished and that sort of thing. The other thing, and this goes to what Beverly was talking about, even though you don't hear that CalCCA is being, say, proactive or really active, a lot of things happen behind the scenes. If you can get to the legislator and explain why their bill doesn't work, or the problems that may be encountered, or the other advocates that may be impacted, a lot of times you get an assurance that, yeah, this thing is not going to go that far, or we've already done another deal on something else. And so it doesn't look like there's a lot going on, but there are a lot of people that are working really diligently on this. And I know Dennis is shaking his head too. He's probably got his association as well. So it would be nice to team up, CAPCOA with Cal CCA. And we even talked about maybe co-membership or something like that. Because we have a lobbyist, we have the same types of reports coming out. And I try to flag for all the other air districts when these bills are coming out so that our board can react to those as well. So I think there's strength in numbers, but we take the educational approach first and foremost, because it's a lot of work to run a bill and to do a lot of opposition. And quite frankly, if you're getting into the opposition phase, that may not curry favors down the road if you need something to be done later on. So there's a lot of art to this, and I know Rob's well versed in that. So rest assured that this is really important stuff to all those folks that care about clean air.
Very good. Mr. Capron.
That was a great recap. Thank you, Robert. And I, for one, would welcome regular email updates, because a lot of these issues are very time sensitive, you know, if they're before committees or before the legislature. I wonder if when we're reaching out, is it okay to sign as a member of the CAC as long as we don't present it as being the position of the CAC in the letter we send?
I think that's appropriate. With respect to your position as a member of the agency, I think the letters that you'll see is that you are a member and you're representing that the authority is opposed, because currently that is our position. So we can work on crafting it because everybody, I think, will have their individual take on those sorts of things. They're just it's a form template that it allows you to kind of get off the ground. But yeah. Well, this board hasn't taken a position and we're all just individual members, the authority has a position on these bills.
Okay, and one other quick question. When you were describing the bill about PG&E not being able to use ratepayer funds to oppose CCAs, what is the clearinghouse? What does that do? What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, well, I think in practice we probably have a long way to go, because this bill will work its way through the process. And it may change significantly, but currently the clearinghouse, I think, you're testing me a little bit here, I think is set up as a CPUC depository where whatever information wanted to be disseminated regarding an LSE would be reviewed and then clarified to be, and I'll use air quotes, accurate, so that there isn't, it's not being used to lobby for or against any particular position. It's just getting accurate information out to ratepayers.
And would ratepayer funds be used to disseminate that information after it had been sanitized by the PUC?
I don't know certainly the way that it would be structured, but if the IOU, if someone is sending it out as part, it would probably be coming as part of a mailer, and I would expect at that point that ratepayer dollars would be used for that. But I'm not 100% certain without the bill and the current amendments in front of me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I spent the day on Tuesday at the Capitol and certainly had the same experiences as was talked about. We don't have a cohesive association, but we do have a lobbyist. And, the only thing it's nice to go up there with a solution in mind, but at the end of the day, all that matters there is winning or losing. And it's a sad reality. I mean, it's a wake-up call when you go there. And there is a great site for tracking bills, leginfo.legislature.ca.gov, and it's really it's very handy for tracking bills, and by keywords and all sorts of things. And as Council said, the whole thing, it doesn't end till it's passed. So what amendments are in the works, day to day, you have no idea. So.
Yeah, not only are the amendments day to day and happening constantly, but we're getting into that area of the legislative process, and I'm not saying that any of these bills are subject to that, but that you see a gut and replace approach.
A gut and amend.
That's right. You would see effectively a bill that looks nothing like what it looked like in its house of origin. So things do move very quickly.
Yeah, that's when the democratic process kind of falls apart. Mr. Groot?
So thank you very much for the the update. Appreciate it. And things do move very quickly, and welcome to Sacramento. And you're lucky you only have 12. I have 600. But the point being, I wanted to echo what Councilman Stedman said, is building coalitions on a lot of these bills is extremely critical, and that's how we end up either winning or defeating some of these really bad bills. And I would suggest that anything that has to do with the CPUC is probably not a good idea. So we need to build coalitions, and I know our particular organization has built a number of different coalitions, many times with people that we don't think we're going to build coalitions with, but that really gets the attention. And again, also letters and contacts to our legislators make a big difference. So as many as we can get in, the better we are.
Excellent comment. There a lot of wisdom in that comment, good admonition and experience there too. Any other comments from the?
I'd say sometimes unlikely voices are helpful, so you can count on the aquarium to try and help where we can.
Excellent. Mr. Mesquita.
Yeah, it will be real helpful to keep us informed on real time of the things that's going to make this agency strong, and also to keep the environment and clean air strong. So I think we're going to rely on you on these bills to really reach out to our representatives.
I think what you're hearing is certainly this council is willing and able to provide that kind of support when it's necessary. So keep us informed and make sure the request is clear as to what you're looking for and when you need it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'd like to add another comment with regard to this. Having worked in Sacramento for 5 years, and literally there's thousands of bills that are put forward every year. I was reminded that is the job of the legislature, to write bills, as frustrating as it sounds, and that's what they get paid to do. And the First Amendment, of course, has that one of 6 provisions in it that we often forget, the right to petition. But what that gave us was lobbyists, and this process is sometimes very ugly. I'm really glad that we're going to have you being paid for all the work you've been doing for this organization beginning July 1. Sounds like you've had 2 jobs, and I'm really glad that we have this gentleman here on the team as well. I'm reminded just briefly, because I feel I could probably say more than council can, but Mr. Bradford's name has popped up a lot this evening, and it has popped up a lot in the past with regard to energy issues. Some of you may recall that he was the author of a bill about 4 or 5 years ago. I call it now the backfire bill, because it was the one that was going to change opt-out to opt-in. Some of you may recall that. That really kind of backfired, because that's when cities and counties started paying attention. It's like, well, there must be something there if a legislator is willing to carry a bill that tries to make it more difficult for CCA to happen. But there's a lot of money that's involved, and it's not just investor-owned utilities, but it does come from the IOUs to do these little cuts by 1,000 deaths, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of effort and resources. But I'm really glad to hear you report that you're confident the Cal CCA is doing a good job. I do know the director of Cal CCA very well. I think very highly of her, and I think she's been in the job now for about 18 months, maybe even less, and she's beginning to staff up. But she has limited funds as well, which come from this organization and others. So I don't think the fight is over, but about 1/3 of this state now is CCA. So the snowball is gaining more and more momentum, and what you said with regard to the importance of our voices to counter the money that enters into this process. Our voices are really the only thing that are strong enough to counter the money that gets behind some of these bills. So I hope I haven't said anything I shouldn't have said. We're not open to public comment yet. We have one more item under the CEO's report. Information only. So you're not going to talk about that. Okay, so any other comments from the council before we go to public comment? Okay, we're looking for public comment on this CEO report only, please. Item number 8.
It's me again, Beverly Deschaux. So my understanding of AB 117, which was the bill or the law that authorized CCAs to be in existence, states that the IOUs or other entities are not allowed to put out any information that would oppose the CCAs, and this bill does. And if it goes through the CPUC, who are kind of with the IOUs, from what we've noticed, it could end up being that we, the ratepayers, pay for information that's opposing the CCAs. So I have a concern about that. And I have a question for you. Are you actually, or either of you actually in Sacramento following stuff, or you're just getting it on your devices? Are you allowed to answer me? I don't know how this stuff works.
Typically, the way it goes is you can ask if we can give you a response, and I'll be more than happy to ask council to do that.
All right. Thank you. Should I go?
I'll just share.
How's this work?
This is a little outside of the normal realm. Both Mr. Keene and I are resident here in the Monterey Bay office. That doesn't mean that we don't go to Sacramento, but we do. I mean, CalCCA and other lobbyists are our direct input there.
I see. Okay. And thank you. And I would like to be on your list of when you send out the updates that you're sending out. If I could do that, check in with you afterwards and give you my contact. Another question? I'm going away.
Thank you. And thank you again for being here. Any other public comments?
Sure, I will. Brett Garrett again, and I'll second what Beverly's saying. If there's a procedure that I, as a member of the public, can be on that list of updates that might be going out to this group, I'd also be very interested in being on that list. I really appreciate that you're working on all these legislative issues. And I had another comment on the part where we heard that I guess if there's excess money available in the budget, it's half for programs and half for rebates. I'm wondering if that's set in stone, or if that's something that this committee might have input on how, that this council might have input on how those funds are distributed. I feel fairly strongly that, at least for many of us, the 3% rebate is plenty. So whatever extra there might be, I really would love to see that focused toward extra rebates for members of the community that need extra rebates, you know, that are low income or something like that. Alternatively, I would love to see that focused toward a higher percentage of renewable energy in the default portfolio. I've always kind of felt that maybe the default should be the MB prime, and people can opt into rebates if they need rebates, as opposed to receiving a larger rebate by default. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
It does. And so let me do this. Let me ask Mr. Killigrew, do you know the answer? Is it a policy decision that it's a 50-50 split on the excess?
Thanks, Chair Byron. Yeah, currently right now, that's the way the budget has been structured, but it's open for us to discuss as we move
But under
forward.
whose guidance? Is it the policy board that made the decision? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sorry to prolong the evening, but I wanted to go back to 8C, I think, programs report. Nice job. Basic on the incentive program for EVs, I heard Beth say something about if there's money left over. Someone asked that question, where was it going to go? And it seems like something's already in the works, that it might go in conjunction with the MBARD program also. I was wondering if you gentlemen and ladies here would get an opportunity to also put in your 2 cents worth of where you would like the money to go. There's no meeting next July or this coming July, but August is when that's going to kind of be put together. So maybe some way you can connect and see if everybody agrees to that, pretty much. I personally don't agree with that, so I'll add my 2 cents worth since I represent the community, as well as several advocacy groups that number at least 3,000 members. I would like to see if there is extra money after that incentive program to go to some form of help for our transit districts, whether it's electrification, a grant that allows them to use it as they see fit, or something, as we mentioned earlier, if they need to go into some type of research and planning to do solar battery storage with the electrification, maybe a grant of some sort to help that would be to good use. The Project Sunshine, I think, is a wonderful program. No comment there. It seems like the Cal VIP program in conjunction with our CEC is kind of on hold, as Beth was saying. I just had one issue with that program. It was the ratio of level 2 to level 3 chargers. I think the level 2 chargers are becoming somewhat obsolete. I've been doing a lot of EV shows myself, and primarily we're getting a lot of long-range vehicles coming to these. The short-range vehicles are less and less, which are primarily better for level 2 charging. The quick charge seems to be used quite a bit. And I hope that, I guess it's Tiara Resources that you have looking into that. Okay, maybe they could look in and see what the usage is throughout the state. It's $1 million, and that's a lot of money. That could also be put in conjunction with the EV leftover money and maybe put aside for something to do with mass transit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments on item 8? All right. We good? So, no, one shot. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to item 9, correct? This would be CAC member reports and comments. And I'll go to Mr. Groot first because he indicated he had one.
Yes, I'd like to, in the absence of our Vice Chair, Natalie, I'd like to give an update on the Community Outreach Ad Hoc Committee that was appointed last month. And we had our first meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it was myself and Horacio and Natalie and JR sat in, and we kind of brainstormed what we wanted to do. And we spent a good hour discussing it and coming up with some ideas for consideration. The location is probably going to be in the Salinas area. We're looking at a number of different areas, but we have something really in mind that we want to do, and we're checking that out. We want to make it more of an outdoor, I don't want to say country fair, but a county fair type atmosphere with food and barbecue to make it more of a family atmosphere to entice more people to come. It was mentioned earlier that we should target disadvantaged community members. We did discuss that at length, and we have decided that we need to engage a lot of the nonprofits, the NGOs, the social service providers to do outreach on this so that we can cover a broader perspective of the community and really publicize the event as best we can. So we'll be doing that, and I would ask any members of the public if you have suggestions for contacts of people that we should get in touch with to broadcast this out when we're ready to publicize the event. Please provide that information, I guess, to Bren, and then she can forward it to the ad hoc committee for consideration. We're going to continue to meet monthly through September. We do have a conference call for July because of some timing issues related to events going on, but we will continue to meet monthly and continue our planning. And we'll take really any suggestions to collaborate with outreach in the community at this point. We really want to make this as inclusive as possible, make sure that we get as good a participation, a cross-representation throughout the community, and targeting the Salinas Valley area and hopefully getting a very good population response from all the way from south of King City all the way north to Watsonville, hopefully. So we'll give an update each month as we go along. We're dark next month, obviously, but we'll have an update for you again in August.
Excellent. Mr. Groot, thank you, and thank everybody on that ad hoc committee that's putting in a little bit of extra time to try and make this workshop more valuable. We're kind of learning as we go here. Yes. I thought the March workshop was excellent. If we can improve upon it, even better. And I know it's very important to the Vice Chair. So this is great. It's not our last workshop. I'm sure we'll be doing more. Anyone else have a report in as part of item 9? The hour is growing late. Okay, this is also a public comment opportunity. Again, there's only one item there, and that's Mr. Groot's report on CAC member reports and comments. Any public comment? Okay, so moving on to, okay, yes, thank you. Council reminded me that we'd really like to flip items 10 and 11, and there's good reason for that. Andy's told me he wants to go home early. Actually, we need to take care of number 11 before we can do number 10. So, Andy,
we're going to take care of Andy.
Item 11 is acknowledging Andy Hartman's service to this Monterey Bay Community Power as the entire community, as well as his participation on the Community Advisory Council. Andy's been involved in this for a long time and helping to organize this, and he's made a decision to resign from the council for reasons I hope he'll tell us about. Andy, I'd like to tell you that besides being a great colleague on this, it's also been wonderful to become a friend of yours over the last year or so. I really value your contributions to this committee, to this council. I'm sorry that you're leaving. We thank you. We're going to miss you a lot. And I have something that's been prepared that I'd like to read to you. It says, Monterey Bay Community Power, in appreciation to Andy Hartman for your outstanding service, concern, and support as a council member, and it's from the Community Advisory Council 2018-2019.
Where's this going to show up? I don't know. Move the camera.
Okay. Well, so Andy, would you like to say anything?
Sure. Half an hour or so?
Take all the time you want.
Thanks for the box, by the way. So you guys get to all look forward to this at some point. So first off, I'd just like to say I'm sorry I'm leaving. I've it's sad too. I've really enjoyed it. It's been an honor being a part of this. I do want to acknowledge Mr. Hibashi for rearranging the agenda. I appreciate my exit being postponed, so thank you for that. Just real briefly, the next time you guys meet, I'm going to be in South America. So I'm taking my wife and my 2 daughters to go on a sabbatical for a year. So we're going to be living abroad and adventuring around South America for a while. So I just want to say, I think just a couple of points are, I think we're hearing from the committee that the agendas have been superficial and maybe not digging as deep as I think this committee would like to go. So I'd like to encourage the council members to try to make it more substantive and valuable to you guys and your time here. So whatever you can do along those lines. I think trying to remember what the reasons that we're here for. So that was, I appreciate earlier the public comment on, bringing up language in the document about what is it that we're trying to achieve. So if I could just encourage you guys to remember what it is that that we want to accomplish here. To me, something that's really important is trying to get local people to work. So I love that economic vitality that can be a component of CCAs. So anything we can do to encourage local jobs and hopefully well-paying jobs would be a good thing, I think. So with that, I look forward to. I think Brandon's going to be a great addition. So I'm really happy with him being on here. I hope Mr. Kimball can play a strong advocacy role on this committee as well. And finally, I hope that Mr. Shaw gives them all a thorough indoctrination of the Brown Act.
Yeah, everybody deserves that,
which,
don't they?
which I think is is sort of what is it? Going through that rite of passage, if you will. So yeah. So thanks very much, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Andy. I don't think you need to go anywhere. I'll just announce that ends Andy's service to this this board, this council. Oh, and the public is welcome to comment as well on this item, item 11. I figured ceremonial we could get away with it, but
you could. I just want to say one thing. I was sorry to see you go. I was with Andy and the coalition that helped form this Citizens Advisory Council, and he was so valuable in his knowledge and people he knew and getting things done. So I really appreciate the time and becoming a friend of yours, and have safe journeys.
Thank you. Very good. Any other public comment? Okay. If it's all right, then I'm going to go ahead and move to the last item, which is item 10, and I'll turn this one over to Mr. Killigrew.
Thank you very much, Chair Byron. With the departure of Mr. Hartman, which we will all miss, you're an incredible asset, and I have a great time down in Ecuador. Seriously, it sounds like an amazing adventure. But Brian Kimball is going to be our new Community Advisory Council member. I've been scouring his resume, and it's pretty fantastic. Most interestingly enough, he spent a lot of time at Ecology Action here, helping with energy efficiency and energy programs. He's also got a JD from Santa Clara University of Law. He got his BA at University of California, Berkeley. Actually has a couple patents. Go figure. So very dynamic gentleman, and we're really excited to have him on board. So we definitely would love to hear from you.
Good. Well, welcome. It looks as though we need to swear you in.
I, Brian Kimball,
do solemnly affirm
that
I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, don't go away, Mr. Kimball. You have the last word this evening. Is there anything you'd like to say before we adjourn?
I'm very much looking forward to working with everybody here, with everybody from the County of Santa Cruz, and in the interest of letting everybody go home, I'm going to use the opportunities afforded to me in the future to speak at much greater length than I am now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're glad to have you. Welcome. And I'd like to thank everybody for being here, particularly the members of the public and all the volunteers around this table. I feel badly when we do this to the staff, but it was a very good evening, good discussion. Oh, we need to comment on this item also.
Well, it's not up to me, it's up to the public.
Of course. So would any members of the public like to speak on this particular agenda item? Seeing none? Again, thank everyone. We are adjourned.